Marcus. Elena's voice was a strangled whisper. David stood up abruptly, the wine glass tumbling onto the carpet. Jesus, Mark, I can explain. Marcus held up a hand, silencing them both. He looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman he'd married had been curious, ambitious, full of dreams about changing the world through art conservation. This woman was bored, entitled, seeking excitement in the oldest, most predictable way possible. And David, his brother in everything but blood. Marcus saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear he'd seen when they were 19 and David had crashed his father's car. The fear of consequences, of being held accountable. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile or a vengeful grimace. It was genuine, warm, almost grateful. Because in that moment, Marcus Chen realized he'd been granted the rarest of gifts. Absolute clarity. Thank you, he said softly. Elena's face contorted with confusion. What? Thank you for making this easy. Marcus turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. He could hear Elena calling after him, her voice rising in panic. He could hear David's footsteps, then stopping, too afraid to follow. Marcus walked down the hallway, took the elevator down, crossed the lobby, and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked through his suit, cold and cleansing. He stood there for a moment, face tilted toward the sky, and laughed. A full, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest. He wasn't mourning. He was celebrating. The drive home was peaceful. Marcus didn't think about confrontations or explanations. He thought about the condo he'd leased in Portland, the job offer he'd been quietly cultivating from a firm that valued work-life balance. He thought about the hiking trip to Patagonia he'd always wanted to take, but Elena had always dismissed as pointless suffering. When he arrived home, he went directly to the guest room, showered, and slept better than he had in months. Elena returned at 3 a.m. He heard her moving through the house, opening doors, looking for him. She found him in the guest room, sitting up in bed, reading a book about long-distance sailing. "We need to talk," she said, her makeup smeared, her hands shaking. "No, we don't." Marcus turned a page. "Marcus, please, you have to scream at me. Hit something, do something." He looked up, his expression mild. "Why would I waste the energy?" Elena sank onto the edge of the bed. "Because I cheated on you, because David betrayed you. Doesn't that make you feel anything?" "It makes me feel relieved." Marcus closed the book, marking his place carefully. "I've spent 6 years trying to be enough for you, Elena. Enough success, enough attention, enough excitement. It was exhausting, and clearly it was never going to be enough." "So that's it? You're just done?" "I've been done for a while." He reopened his book. "The divorce papers will be served on Monday. I'm keeping the company's stock and the retirement accounts. You can have the house and your gallery connections. I've already moved my personal items." "You planned this?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "I planned for every contingency. It's what I do." Marcus met her eyes with perfect calm. "You'll sign the papers, Elena. Because if you fight me, I'll release the financial records showing how much of your gallery success was funded by my bonuses. I'll show the art world that every major piece you've brokered was purchased by shell companies I created. You'll go from curator to charity case overnight." Elena's face went white. "You wouldn't." "I would prefer not to, but I will if necessary." He returned to his book. "I suggest you call David." "Oh, wait, he's not answering, is he? He blocked your number about an hour ago." I checked. The next morning, Marcus went to the office early. David was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. He tried to intercept Marcus at the elevator, but Marcus simply walked past him into his office and closed the door. At 9 a.m., he called a partner meeting. The room filled with the firm's senior leadership, coffee mugs in hand, expecting the usual quarterly review. Marcus stood at the head of the table. "I'm resigning, effective in 30 days. I'll be transitioning all my clients and recommending my replacement." He slid a folder across to the managing partner. "However, I need to address a conflict of interest. David Brennan has engaged in conduct that violates our professional ethics guidelines. The details are in Exhibit A." The room went silent. David's face drained of color. Marcus didn't mention the affair. He didn't need to. The documents showed how David had used firm resources for personal matters, billed hours to clients while conducting personal business, and created a pattern of misconduct that was grounds for dismissal. "I leave it to the ethics committee," Marcus said, "but I wanted transparency before my departure." He left the meeting, collected his personal items, and walked out of Hartwell and Associates for the last time. He didn't look back. Elena tried calling 53 times that week. Marcus answered none of them. Instead, he hired movers that transferred his accounts and booked a one-way ticket to New Zealand. The divorce was finalized remotely. Elena signed everything without contest. David was terminated from the firm and struggled to find employment in Seattle's tight-knit legal community. 3 months later, Marcus stood on a beach in Abel Tasman National Park, watching the sun set over crystalline water. His phone buzzed with an email from Elena. He deleted it without reading. A woman approached along the shoreline, a marine biologist he'd met during a kayaking tour. "Join us for dinner?" she asked, her smile uncomplicated and genuine. "I'd like that," Marcus said. That night, sitting around a bonfire with strangers who were becoming friends, someone asked him about his divorce. "Best thing that ever happened to me," Marcus said, and he meant it. Because Elena had given him the gift of freedom without the guilt of choosing it himself. She'd broken the cage while trying to hurt him, not realizing he'd been waiting for exactly that. Months turned into a year. Marcus built a new practice focusing on environmental law, work that felt meaningful. He hiked mountains, learned to dive, fell in love with someone who valued presence over presence. Back in Seattle, Elena struggled. The gallery lost its major backers when Marcus's support disappeared. Her reputation suffered not from scandal, but from irrelevance. She'd been a big fish in a pond Marcus had built, and without him, the pond had dried up. She thought about that smile often. The genuine, warm smile he'd given her in the hotel room. For years, she'd interpreted it as cruelty, as the prelude to revenge. But revenge would have required him to still care. That smile had been something far more devastating. It had been goodbye. Not an angry goodbye, not a hurt goodbye, but a grateful one. He'd smiled because she'd freed him from the obligation of staying in a marriage that was slowly killing his spirit. The smile haunted her because it meant she hadn't broken him. She'd liberated him. And in doing so, she'd lost the only person who had ever truly invested in her success. 2 years after the divorce, Elena saw Marcus's picture in a magazine feature about lawyers making a difference in environmental conservation. He looked happy, genuinely happy, standing on a boat with a team of researchers. She tried to feel angry, to feel vindicated, to feel anything that would make sense of her choices, but all she felt was the echo of that smile and the devastating understanding that she had been a weight he'd been relieved to set down. The greatest punishment Marcus had given her wasn't anger or revenge. It was indifference. And that indifference, that gentle, smiling indifference, was something she would carry forever. Because you can argue with anger, you can fight hate, but you cannot fight someone who has simply stopped caring. And that was the true price of her betrayal. Not his fury, but his freedom. Marcus Chen had built his empire with surgical precision. At 38, he was the youngest partner at Hartwell and Associates, commanding a corner office overlooking Seattle's glittering skyline. His hands were steady as he reviewed the quarterly reports, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation he'd overheard 3 nights ago. His wife Elena's voice had drifted through the bathroom door, soft and conspiratorial. "He's so consumed with work, he doesn't even notice anymore." Yes, tonight. The usual place. Marcus had continued brushing his teeth, the mint foam suddenly tasting bitter. He didn't confront her. He simply made a mental note and continued his evening routine with mechanical precision. The art of patience, he'd learned long ago, was the foundation of every successful strategy. Elena Hart-Chen was a vision of elegance that evening, her amber dress catching the light as she descended the stairs of their lakeside home. She kissed Marcus on the cheek, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar. "The charity board meeting might run late. Don't wait up." "Drive safely," Marcus replied, not looking up from his laptop. He felt her hesitate, perhaps expecting resistance or questions. When none came, she left, the click of her heels fading into the night. Marcus waited exactly 12 minutes. Then he closed his laptop, picked up his keys, and followed a route he'd memorized from tracking her phone's location history over the past 2 months. The Meridian Hotel. Room 847. Always room 847. The rain had started turning Seattle's streets into rivers of reflected neon. Marcus drove with the calm focus of a surgeon approaching an operating table. There was no rage, no trembling hands, just the cool certainty of a man who had already calculated every variable. David Brennan, his college roommate, his best man, the godfather to the daughter they'd never had, because Elena claimed the timing was never right. Marcus had recommended David for senior counsel at Hartwell 2 years ago, vouching for his character with absolute conviction. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built the stage for his own betrayal. The hotel lobby was understated luxury, leather, marble, and discretion. Marcus didn't approach the front desk. He'd obtained a master key card 3 weeks ago through a maintenance contact, a small investment that had cost him $5,000 and required no questions asked. The elevator hummed as it ascended. Marcus studied his reflection in the polished doors. He looked composed, professional, a man heading to a business meeting, not to the detonation of his personal life. Floor 8. The hallway stretched before him, plush carpet muffling his footsteps. He could hear music from one room, laughter from another. Normal people living normal lives. Room 847 was at the end of the hall. Marcus stood before the door, his hand steady on the key card. He thought about his parents' marriage, 43 years of quiet dedication. He thought about the promises he'd made at the altar, Elena's eyes bright with what he'd believed was forever. Then he thought about the offshore account he'd opened last month, the apartment lease he'd signed under an LLC, the resignation letter already drafted in his desk drawer, ready to submit the day after the firm's annual bonus distribution. Marcus swiped the card. The lock clicked open. The room was dimly lit, champagne on ice, clothes scattered like breadcrumbs leading to the king-sized bed. Elena was standing by the window, wrapped in a hotel robe, laughing at something David had said. David sat on the edge of the bed, shirt unbuttoned, a glass of wine dangling from his fingers. They turned simultaneously, the laughter dying in their throats. Marcus had prepared for this moment, rehearsed various scenarios in his mind: anger, accusations, violence. But standing there, actually seeing them, something unexpected happened. The weight he'd been carrying, the constant vigilance, the performance of being the perfect husband, the exhausting effort of maintaining Elena's lifestyle while she slowly drifted away, it simply evaporated. He felt lighter than he had in years.